Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to New Wave Global. I'm Rabia Mehmood. Wave is an independent news site which looks at the world through a South Asian lens and relies on your support. Please do like, subscribe, comment, and engage with our work. Today, we are speaking to you from Lahore, which is engulfed in thick layers of toxic hazardous smog, actively putting the lives of millions at risk in the Punjab province. Smog is so intense that it is visible from the space. There is also a partial lockdown in parts of the province. To understand what is happening in Punjab, we have with us Ahmad Rafay Alam, an environmental lawyer and member of Pakistan's Climate Council. Rafay has been an advocate for climate and environmental justice for years now. Rafay, thanks for joining us. It has been years of this severe situation with regards to smog and air pollution in Lahore, and now we know more about it from the rest of Punjab as well. Why is it so, and why is it not addressed on war footing?
Well, Rabia, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. As you said, I've been, and my colleagues, many of them have been talking about air pollution for years. Smog is a type of air pollution, and I think one of the reasons why not much headway has been made officially, even though civil society groups have been very, very vocal, is that the public perception of the problem is that it is a seasonal Lahore smog issue. And neither of these things are true. It's not seasonal, it's not a Lahore issue, it's not smog. Smog is a type of air pollution that's formed when you have certain meteorological conditions. You've got the smoke from pollution, you've got fog from the meteorological conditions, and when they mix together, you get something called smog. This is a type of air pollution. You can have haze, you can have dust, you can have other types of air pollution. It's not a Lahore issue because air pollution is endemic in most North Indian cities from Kabul to Calcutta, as a matter of fact. It's a regional issue. And air pollution is endemic throughout the year. You know, the same things that cause pollution in October, November, December, which is when we call it the season, the automobiles, the industrial emissions, the energy emissions, they're the same that are taking place in June or July, except at that point in time, because it's hot air rises, you've got the monsoon rains, and that keeps air quality relatively stable at about 150 to 300 through the year. It's just that in winter, when things start cooling down, the hot air doesn't rise, the monsoon winds are absent. We're waiting for the western disturbances winds to come. There's a sort of static winds, and all of this pollution gathers together in the winter time, and we tend to think of it as a winter problem. This is a year-long regional public health disaster, and as long as people in the government of Punjab and the EPAs and even in the Pakistani government think of it as a localized seasonal issue, it's never going to be resolved.
Okay. So, yes, like you're saying, it becomes an issue in winter for some reason because it's more visible, or it becomes a story in winter, right? I mean, it's being covered like anything everywhere across the world. The AQI readings are being followed every day. That's when we see most of it. And like you're saying, that it should be 300 or something, or it is 300 or something up to that point. But we know by now that the readings, AQI, air quality index readings, are such that it's crossed all degrees of, or all limits of what is okay, right? It's hazardous and it's terrifyingly scary. You're calling it a disaster. Can you elaborate a bit on how terrifying this is? Because just like yesterday, the UNICEF came out with a statement that 11 million children in Punjab under the age of 5 are severely at risk, and 12% of the children in Punjab are already dying because of air pollution.
Well, let me explain how this is a public health catastrophe. You know, we're sitting here in early November talking about the high levels of AQI, which have crossed 1,000. And like I said, throughout the year, cities in Pakistan usually track an AQI between 150 and 300, 350. The World Health Organization suggests that any AQI over 50 or indeed 100 is now dangerous to health. So throughout the year, Pakistanis are exposed to, hazardous levels of air pollution and then extremely hazardous levels of air pollution because of the meteorological conditions and exacerbated by crop burning during this particular time of year. There is an incredible burden of health that this air pollution sort of manifests. The World Health Organization, for example, says that about 9 million people a year prematurely lose their life because of air pollution around the world. And what I have to stress with this figure, to put it into context, is that these 9 million people aren't equally distributed amongst the many countries of the earth. They're concentrated. This 9 million is concentrated in the cities of Asia and Africa. And I would suggest that in the North Indian Peninsula, more so, this is where the apocalypse is happening. And it manifests itself. We are going to suffer immeasurably. Already, just last winter, the news reports out of Punjab suggested hundreds of children died of pneumonia, which is, of course, is a respiratory illness exacerbated by air pollution. And I fear with these extremely elevated, we're talking 10 times, 15 times what the World Health Organization suggests is reasonable, currently in the air with people not protected, that there's going to be a mass calamity in the coming days and weeks. I really fear this. One of the problems with contextualizing air pollution in Pakistan is the fact that there's very little research on the public health implications of air pollution. I know if you go abroad, if you look at America and Europe, and even in India, there are epidemiological studies that give you the sort of impacts on health for every 5 or 10 degrees rise in air quality index. We have nothing like that in Pakistan, so our stakeholders really don't know, our policymakers really don't know how bad this is for people. We do rely on anecdotal evidence, but this level of air pollution, this apocalypse is a calamity, and I really fear in the future what sort of numbers and figures it's going to throw up.
Yes, this is a Pakistan problem, right? Like we never have enough data, we never have enough research on critical issues. Or if we have the data or some research, then we have it from the bigger cities only, like say from Punjab or like Lahore or Karachi for that matter, or Islamabad to a degree. So that's there. I'm going to ask a really simple question. Who is to blame for all this?
At some level, the poor air quality that we see in Pakistan, indeed in the region, is a governance issue. This is a problem that I have been tracking and have been actively involved in since 2016. But the Male Declaration, which is a SARC agreement on air pollution, is from the 1990s. Pakistan's first Clean Air Action Plan was in 2005. We've had at least 25 years of knowledge that air pollution is an issue. And this sort of seasonal smog that we call so-called in the last 8 years have been raising, Rabia, me and my colleagues at the Air Quality Initiative, we've written articles, we've appeared on television, we've done interviews like this, we've written in the newspapers, we've featured in a full-length documentary, we've held protests and rallies, we've been to court, we've filed public interest litigations, we've appeared before the Senate and National Assembly standing committees on climate change and human rights, and yet nobody listens. Nobody has listened, and every year it's the same. It's considered a localized seasonal problem that is the fault of India and not ours. Really, no navel gazing has taken place, and as a result, there are no long-term measures in place to deal with this issue. There are no short-term measures, I might add, for this intensity of air pollution. There are only long-term measures that will take 5, 10, 15, 20 years to implement, which might only see up to 50% of a reduction in air pollution. But that level of data, of science that can guide policy, and then the vision and political will that's necessary to implement that policy, along with the finances that are necessary, I don't see that anywhere in Pakistan right now, and which is why I fear for the future.
Okay, so you, on this grim note, I'm going to come back to your point about this being a regional problem. You've rightly said that this is a regional problem. The situation is quite terrifying in parts of India as well, as we keep saying that there's a lot of competition between Pakistani and Indian cities when it comes to the air quality, as in which country or which city has it worse. So we are like in the top 5. And then at the same time, we've seen, you've said, like, we blame India there, that there's the farmers' fault, they're burning something, it's coming from there, it's sensationalized as well. But we've recently seen that there were some statements. We have no idea like how serious the government is, but Punjab government has stated has shown inclination to speak to their counterparts in India to tackle this thing, which is a positive development. I mean, this issue should bring us together if we think about things in those terms. And we are also at the front lines when it comes to the climate crisis, both our countries or other countries in the region. So, can you speak a bit about that to us?
Well, this idea of air pollution or climate diplomacy has been floating around. It's not new, Rabia. In the 1990s, as I said, the SAARC countries got together to sign the Mali Declaration. That was environmental diplomacy. In 2017, the Chief Minister of Punjab, at that time Shehbaz Sharif, wrote to the Indian Chief Minister of Punjab speaking about air pollution. And so this is the third time I'm seeing this happen. Excuse me. Um, but for a government to be able to say that the air pollution is coming from India should at least be backed by some scientific data. Right now, the government of Punjab has a total of no more than 5 or 6 air pollution monitors. That's not enough for Lahore, let alone the old province, or to be able to monitor the winds and the pollution that's coming in from India. So to be able to make a statement like that without science behind it seems to indicate that you're trying to blame someone else and not look at the problems you're originating yourself. Now, that said, the dominant winds over the region of North India are the monsoons and the westerly disturbances. In the winter times, winds generally come from the west to the east and pass over Pakistan to India. And although right now we're still waiting for the Western disturbances, there are technological apps like Windy that you can go to that show that for a couple of hours, winds go from here to there, from India to Pakistan, but not enough really to substantiate a claim like that. As a matter of fact, I was watching a video today of the Chief Minister of Indian Punjab very lightly remarking that he'd receive a letter from Lahore saying that their air pollution was going to Lahore, while at the same time the folks in Delhi were blaming their farmers for smoke going there. So, we have to get our science and data right. That said, with the millions of people who are exposed to high levels of air pollution and the immense damage to life and indeed even agriculture that ensues, I think this should be something that the two countries sit down and talk about. However, when I do think about that, I really don't know what more they can do than install air quality monitors and share and disseminate information about it amongst themselves, and then set up research institutions in the SAARC countries that will share information. If that is what I would think would be ideal, well, that's exactly what's contained in the Mali Declaration of the 1990s, which hasn't gone anywhere. And at the same time, I look at the fractured relationship between Islamabad and Delhi, and I really don't see much hope, unfortunately, in any concrete actions, although this should be important in any concrete actions on climate or air pollution diplomacy in the future.
Okay, so this brings me to my last question that at COP29, Shehbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has made his case today or, spoken to the world about Pakistan's case. And it's also a representation of what's happening in the global south or global majority at the moment in context of climate crisis, considering we are at the front line of this issue. So, how do you see that? Because he's also again spoken about financial support. And the previous discussions which have taken place in COP27 and COP29, and for countries in the north to come through. Can you address that a bit and explain to us as to how important that is? Because you are also speaking about governments prioritizing it as and something that should be prioritized on war footing, I believe. And they are also not deploying the necessary resources, human or financial, to this issue here. I mean, I don't think that it can only be done if we have more money from somewhere else. But of course, we do need the support. Please.
Well, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which governs all of these conference of parties and things like the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement, seeks to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions by having developed countries mitigate their greenhouse gas emissions and then provide finance to less developed countries so that they can adapt to the impacts of climate change caused mostly by the emissions of the global north and developed economies. Now, the way it's worked is that global north countries haven't quite mitigated their greenhouse gas emissions. As a matter of fact, we've seen more emissions since the UNFCCC was signed than in all of human history before that. And at the same time, global north countries have not fulfilled their commitments to provide climate finance or adaptation finance. You know, in 2010, the G20 countries agreed to set up a global climate fund of $100 billion by 2020. It's 2024, and there are less than $14 billion in that fund. And to give you context, the United States Congress this April voted for over $70 billion to be given to Ukraine and Israel for war. So while there's money for fighting, there isn't any money, and it's a broken promise from the global north to countries. And as a result, countries of the global south. And as a result, countries in the global south, like Pakistan, face a shortage of funds to be able to set up the infrastructure necessary, the governance necessary to adapt to the climate crisis. In these circumstances, Pakistan being a small country which hasn't emitted many greenhouse gases and yet is very vulnerable to climate change, Pakistan's position at this COP is really focusing on the availability of global climate finance, trying to get the global north countries to be able to fulfill their commitments and their pledges to global finance, and also open pathways to Pakistan for that finance to flow. Now, that said, if I can give some background and context, the focus Pakistan has presently relies on fundamentally the fact that Pakistan's a low greenhouse gas emitting country. And secondly, right now, our economy needs dollars. And so the focus is to see whether we can set up a carbon trading policy, whether we can have access to global climate funds so that we can get dollars into the country. What this is ignoring, and in the context of air pollution, is the emissions in Pakistan that are causing the air apocalypse right now. We might be a net low greenhouse gas emitter compared to other countries like Canada or the United States, but I just have to look out my window to know that emissions here are also killing me. Our policy has to be a little bit more robust than just seeking climate finance for adaptation, but also really look towards climate finance towards mitigation as well, given this present health crisis. So while I can sympathize with Pakistan's position at COP right now, it is born out of economic necessity. It still needs to be more robust. It needs also to speak to mitigation and things like addressing the air pollution as well.
And we can't absolve ourselves of the responsibility that we have, the government as domestically.
I fear for the death toll this year, Rabia.
Yeah, and I feel like the death toll again, because this is also such a Pakistan issue, that there's this trust deficit, right? That we think that it's underreported, which is of course based in like some legitimate concerns, because again, we don't have a documentation process which is proper. Or like last year, the children's deaths for pneumonia, and at the moment as well, where like I was looking at some news story saying that 15,000 patients have a record number of patients admitted because of respiratory issues. And yet you think that because the governments benefit from underreporting of certain issues in some situations, so we don't know where the real numbers are. And can you also at the end speak a bit about the rest of the country, not just it's not just a Punjab problem as such, right?
Yeah.
Because we have Karachi, and in KP as well there are other problems. So do you know that other than parts of Karachi, is there means of recording or monitoring air quality in the rest of the country?
Well, in order to monitor air quality, you need to have air quality monitors. The government of Punjab, as I mentioned, only has a handful. Same is true with the government of Sindh, and most of them are deployed in Karachi. There are almost none in KPK and Balochistan. What we have is the private sector, individuals who have bought low-cost monitors, connected them outside and attached them to the internet that provide this data online, that what is being reported on. There is a shortage of data when it comes to air pollution. And depending on where you set up an air pollution monitor, you'll find that all of a sudden a new Pakistani city is on the list of the most polluted. And this is very much the case of Peshawar, where only 4 or 5 years ago, the first private monitors were installed, and immediately Peshawar jumped to the top of the list. And when we added Faisalabad, Faisalabad jumped. When we added Multan, Multan jumped up on the list as well. Every Pakistani city is subject to, there are a few that we have that suggests that the majority of the air pollution year round in Pakistan is caused by emissions from cars, trucks, and motorcycles. That's because we have some of the dirtiest fuel on earth. And then it's energy production and industrial emissions. So any city that has a large number of cars or motorbikes, any city where there's a power plant close by, or any city where there's any relatively heavy industry is going to be suffering from air pollution. And the Air Quality Life Index in the University of Chicago has reported that on average, Pakistani citizens in any city in Pakistan are losing about 2 years of life expectancy. In the case of Lahore, it is as much as 7 or 8 years because of the intensity of air pollution. So it really is just a question of where you set up the monitors. The causes of air pollution are the same throughout Pakistan's cities. And air pollution respects no boundaries. And this air pollution, therefore, will spread out and go into rural areas as well, causing immense damage to health and livestock in its wake.
Rafi Alam, thank you for speaking with us, and thank you to our viewers for watching. Khuda Hafiz.